All right, welcome back to the show. So, fighting game player, greatest of all time. Here's the issue. So, obviously, we're talking about this right after Winter Brawl. We just discussed results for Winter Brawl. Now we're talking about this. Why is that?
It's because a lot of people are talking about Sonic Fox now, right? Sonic Fox is being the greatest player of all time because he's so damn good at everything that he touches. He wins everything, and he's pretty much, I've often talked about natural talent versus, hard work and stuff like that. And even players like Justin, like Daigo, who seem like that they're super good. Chris G, who all seem like that they've just were natural. All have stories about how they used to suck and just like people would beat the crap out of them and they'd have to work hard to get there. Just recently, the Kemonomichi or whatever the Daigo tournament was announced, and Daigo and Tokido are going to be playing against each other in that in a 1st to 10. And Tokido in the interview clip is just like, "Oh man, I've been practicing hard and doing all this stuff." So even Tokido's talking about how he has to work so hard.
Sure.
I feel like Sonic Fox is like the #1 example of the guy who was just like born to play fighting games.
Well, so the story of Sonic Fox, I think, is something that could only have happened kind of this deep into fighting games. It couldn't have happened 20 years ago because his background is he grew up with a top fighting game player brother.
Right.
One of the best DOA players for a long time.
It's Quigley, right?
Yeah, Quiggles.
Quiggles, that's what it is. I'm thinking of Skullgirls Squiggly.
Yeah,
yes.
sure.
Okay.
So he grew up in that kind of a household where like his older brother was super strong, and so they must have played thousands of hours together.
Oh yeah.
Thousands of hours together. But it's hard to have imagined that happening much earlier because fighting games weren't in the start. Nobody had an older brother who played fighting games because everybody was playing it for the first time, and then there weren't that many people playing.
Yeah.
And then so finally you get a situation where you have enough people playing that one of them has a younger brother, and then they play all the time, and the older brother's super good anyway, and that's how Sonic Fox comes about. Like I feel like there's a ton of innate talent there. He's just a super smart fellow. Like he catches on to things very quickly. There's clearly a lot of natural talent, but then on top of that, he had his 10,000 hours that it takes to become an expert in something by the time he was like 13.
Right. By the way, your microphone keeps rubbing against your shirt.
Okay.
Sorry, it keeps making little
I see.
noises. Okay.
So that's Sonic Fox. I don't think it's just that he's naturally talented. It's that it happened.
Yeah.
Like he put in the work in different ways. Justin started playing in the arcades at a certain age. He didn't have like this older brother figure, right?
And he didn't have training mode,
right?
And he didn't have all this
So
knowledge.
it's hard to imagine somebody like Sonic Fox coming about in previous generations.
And yeah, I mean, even when I sit here and say that I feel like he's naturally talented, I'm being a little cheeky about that because it's very obvious that the man puts in practice, right?
He does.
I mean, what was the one time that he didn't succeed was when he lost in the E-League for
Injustice
Justice
E-League,
because he was playing too much Marvel because he wasn't practicing enough Injustice, right? So obviously the guy does put in work and everything like that. I'm not going to say that the guy is just like sitting there and wins come for free for him,
but not that expensively at this point.
Yeah. But the one thing that I will say though is, do I consider Sonic Fox the greatest of all time? No.
Okay.
No.
To me, there are two aspects of this, and it's the same that you always get in a greatest of all time discussion.
Okay.
Well, one is you judge a player by his competition at the time, right? That's one aspect of it. On the other aspect of it is if in Fantasyland somebody from X time and place were to play against somebody else from Y time and place, which one would win, right? So I feel that Sonic Fox, if you put him into like almost any other time and place, he would just eat everybody alive. That he would for sure destroy everybody. But like I said, I think it's very difficult to, at the same time, to do that because it's hard to have imagined him becoming him.
Right? Yeah.
In previous eras,
because like if you gave someone else what Sonic Fox has right now, who was a top player back in the day. Like, let's say John Choi grew up in an age where fighting game, you could pay for your college with fighting games.
Right.
And, and he had an older sibling that was also training him, and he had training mode. John Choi would probably be as good as Sonic Fox is right now.
It's maybe, for sure.
Right? So it's tough to say. It's tough to say. Like, I honestly think if someone like Tomo Ohira was born today, for example, like, he would just be ridiculous, because having been a person who has seen Tomo actually play, and back then seeing what he's done and me going, how does he do this? And now that I'm older, I'm like, I know exactly how he's doing it. But he was doing stuff that we're talking about as strategies now, like 20 years later. Back then, he was 20 years ahead of his time already. He was like 15, 10 years ahead of his time. Right? So he was already doing all that kind of stuff. If he was born in this environment, if he was the same age as Sonic Fox, he would probably be as good as Sonic Fox is, you know?
I think that's very unlikely. And the reason is that I think that at some point it's a numbers game. And it's possible that somebody who is in a group of 10 is the best of this group of 10 is as talented as the best of a group of 1,000. Possible. Pretty unlikely. Right? So Sonic Fox has to be in a situation where tournaments have 1,000 people or 500 people.
Right.
And that, I just feel like the best of that is probably more talented naturally than somebody of a group of 10.
Right. I mean,
so, it's hard to know for sure, but
probability for sure. But Tomo was already that much better than everybody else.
I hear
like,
you. He seems like a very good player.
Nobody was giving him any sort of competition at all back then. You know, he was super, super good. So if he was born in this time, he would have that same kind of exposure, that many people to play against, and I think he would be one of the best right now. I really honestly do.
Seems very unlikely to me, but nice. So again, for the greatest of all time discussion, there's this side that you can't answer, which is if you take person from X time and play person from Y time, what happens?
Right.
Who knows? My opinion is that Sonic Fox is maybe that guy who could beat anybody from any time, but I don't know. So I feel like what's more concrete is who dominated their time and their place, like against the actual people who were there.
Yes.
So when I talk about the greatest fighting game player of all time, there are those two sides. You know what I mean? And they're not. The other thing is that it's possible that like the second best player of a certain game and time is maybe like the third greatest player ever, based on the sort of like who would beat whom in what time.
Right.
Like maybe the first place guy was actually the best player ever. So the second place guy in that scene is like super good still, but you know, he's not dominating and winning everything. So I don't know. It's a hard decision to kind of suss out, but you know, it's one that I don't know. I've been doing in sports since I was a baby. So
this is why everybody talks about it, because everybody likes to have these debates.
Yeah.
You know, having said that, none of the people that we've talked about here yet is my pick for greatest of all time.
Well, we haven't really mentioned that many people.
Right. Yeah. So
yeah, I think for both of us, it's Tokido.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, Tokido. So the reason is that Tokido has done it over 2 decades in every genre, in a bunch of different games. And he's done it at the highest possible level against the best competition.
Yep. And he's done it in the small pond, and he's done it in the big ocean.
Exactly.
Right? So he won a giant 2,500-man Street Fighter V tournament, and he also won CVS2 back in 2002.
Yeah, and in both of those cases, he's playing like the biggest game of the time, or maybe like top 2 or 3, depending for CVS2. So that's like the most impressive thing to me, is if somebody can win in the biggest games over a long period of time in a bunch of different games.
Yes.
For me, that's the person who's most exemplifies that is Tokido.
Yeah. I think Tokido is, for the longest time, the names that I always had in the list, like maybe 5 years ago, the 3 names that I always had in the list were Tokido, Ryan Hart, and Justin Wong. Those were the 3 main ones. But since then, like Ryan Hart, obviously he's gone more on the presentation side of kind of things. Justin hasn't been able to quite, you know, like he's not having the same success as Tokido is having in Street Fighter, for example. And so I feel like right now Tokido has just kind of vaulted himself into the lead. Now, having said that, Ryan Hart, Justin, still in the conversation right
well,
there.
because they're the players who exemplify the how well did you do against the actual players of your actual place and time. They both were super successful.
Right. As well as Daigo, for example.
Of course. But the reason that Tokido gets the ultimate nod for me is that he did that in more times and more places than anybody else. So.
Right.
So yeah, I think he's the best.
Now, I mean, there's an interesting. So someone in the chat, Jose Ramirez says that the real GOAT is Daigo. He's the only one you can name as the face of the fighting games. That's a different criteria.
Right.
That's a different criteria. If you wanted to pick one guy to like launch to a foreign planet to be the ambassador of fighting games, yeah, Daigo is going to be the one that you're going to send because he's the most well known.
He's the most famous.
Right. He's the most famous. Right.
Probably the easiest way to put it.
Yeah. Exactly. But I think Tokido is still up there. But I think that there's a new crop as well, right?
Yeah.
Sonic Fox is leading that crop for sure, right?
Okay.
So I mean, if we had to name 5 players, greatest fighting game players of all time, Sonic Fox is already in that conversation.
It probably is, yeah.
He can't not be, right?
Yeah.
He can't not be. He's already automatically there. I think Chris G is also there
I'm with
as
you on
well.
that. Yeah, Chris is
right?
on that.
And I think one of the people that I've started naming a lot on Twitter that I haven't seen a lot of other people talk about, honestly, is Goichi. I really think he's the Japanese Sonic Fox.
Sure. Why not? He's done super strong in a bunch of different games.
I mean, he's been playing all the anime games forever. He was one of the best in Melty Blood. He was one of the best in Aquapaza. And you remember that, I think it was Final Round when Pokken just came out. He just randomly showed up and was like, oh, Pokken, and he got first place in Pokken.
Yeah.
And now he's one of the best in Street Fighter, and he's winning everything in Dragon Ball in Japan right now. So I actually think Goichi's kind of like the Japanese Sonic Fox. And I'm not saying that just to hype the rivalry between them up right now, because that's sick, by the way, that it just worked out for those two guys to do that. But, I mean, I really think Goichi might be in that conversation as well as one of the greatest of all time.
Yeah, that makes some sense to me. Where I begin to be a little bit questioning as to whether somebody is the greatest of all time is when their game and their time was like too small. So that's like part of why I question Tomo.
Right.
Because there were almost nobody was playing comparatively. Right. And it's part of why people aren't mentioning Perfect Legend as much as other people.
Right.
Perfect Legend, he won 2 Mortal Kombat 9 Evos, and he won Dead or Alive Evo, which is very impressive. And he definitely, if we're just talking about winning in a place and time, he needs to be among the greatest of all time. But if it's just so difficult to compare those games to people who dominated in other games because not that many people were playing them.
I think one of the hardest things about, I mean, this is just me personally.
But he needs to be up there in that conversation, nevertheless.
With the Tomo situation, though, is that, man, there were a lot of people playing Street Fighter 2 back then.
Everybody saw it.
There were a lot. No, see, that's the thing. I disagree with that.
I wasn't around, so I don't know. Man.
I actually disagree with that because it was at a point where you could not go to an arcade and everybody didn't know the top strategies. I went to random ass video store in BFE and like everybody was already playing at the highest level of strategy. You know what I mean? It was like you could not avoid that.
Yeah.
Because the thing that made that era so strong was that there were no other fighting games to play.
Sure.
So everybody had to play that. So, yeah.
I don't know, buddy.
Dude,
I feel like it's like people being like some late 1800s baseball player was like the greatest because you only had baseball at the time, but there were 1,000 people were playing baseball.
But
come on.
It's the reason why it's a little different is because if we've been playing Street Fighter 2 this whole entire time, maybe it's a little different, but we keep changing games and things like that, right? So, I mean, at the time, that's the thing is that was such a golden era. There were so many strong players back then. You know what I mean? Like, everybody was playing this game. It was like for example, if we had a bunch of people picking up Pac-Man right now, today in 8, and started playing it, would they be better than the Pac-Man players from back then?
If there were the same number of people playing, probably about the same.
Right, they would be about the same, right? But that's the thing is back then, everybody was playing Pac-Man, so that the number of people, the probability, like you said, is good. And in Street Fighter 2, everybody was playing that game.
I mean, yeah, that's true.
Everybody was playing
you.
that game, dude. I can't.
I just don't believe it.
I can, dude. It's true. It's true. Trust me.
I know lots of people were playing. I mean, I get that. Yeah, I think that the sort of number and times of people, it's very hard to compare.
Yeah. But I think if he was in this scenario, if he was born and raised in this age, he would be as strong as anybody else. So,
who knows,
like
buddy?
I said, from what I've seen.
Who knows? Who knows? I think the maybe biggest reason that I think that is that those players didn't end up keeping up with players from later in the 90s, let alone players in the zeros, let alone players now.
Well, Tomo also retired on time.
Of course, right.
So.
He retired early. But the players that not a lot of them kept playing, I get it, but the players that did keep playing were outclassed by the late 90s. Almost all of them, right? I mean, right? Like Watson and Schaefer and...
Yeah, but they were all still really relevant around that time, and they hadn't played, and they weren't keeping up as much as everybody
they're very
else,
talented
right?
players. I mean, I played against Watts. I know he's really good. I just think that it's like an indicator that each era beats the players of the previous era, with only a few exceptions ever.
Yeah, but I mean, let's just put it this way. Even if, let's just say we go into a fighting game slump, let's say the bubble bursts.
Yeah.
And 5 years, 10 years down the line, we are at a point where we have less players.
Yeah.
Those players would probably be beating Chris G and Sonic Fox and all these guys right now. They would probably be beating them. It's just age and just youth and that kind of situation. You know what I mean? I think that's the case.
Yeah, I don't think that's true. There are players like Tokido who's been doing it for 20 years.
But Tokido's very rare, right?
Sure,
that's
but I think
why he is.
But the rarity of him, I think, is that he had the skills that were so strong early on that are that is to say that they were strong enough early on that they're still relevant now, right? Rather than it being a case of he was very strong, then he's degraded because he's gotten older, but he's still good. It's more like his skills at the time when he was young were already really, really high, and so he's kind of kept level, and everybody else has gone up, rather than him going down and sort of catching up with other people.
I mean, that's the exact argument that I have for Tomo, though. That's the exact argument I have for him. He was that much better than everyone else, and everyone was catching up to him.
For sure,
right?
So again, it's not that I think it's impossible that Tomo could do it. I think it's just really unlikely. That's all. Okay. Anyway, yeah, I think Sonic Fox is really good. I don't think that he. So, I think it's tough to proclaim somebody the best player in an era if they're not playing the games that are most played.
Oh yeah.
You know, and you know the NRS head in me thinks this is kind of dumb to say, but people who aren't winning in Street Fighter, which is the biggest game in the world, it's not as hard. It's hard.
Right.
Certainly the NRS scene is way better than it used to be, but it's not as hard. So if he were to win in Street Fighter, then I feel like it's a closed contest.
Right,
But that's nothing to do with Street Fighter itself. It's not like innate to the game or the series. It's just that it's the most commonly played game.
The thing about it is if Sonic Fox wanted to dedicate himself to Street Fighter, he'd be winning that too.
I think that's very likely, to be honest.
If he really wanted to play Street Fighter, he'd be winning that as well.
I think you're right. I mean, but it's hard. I just think it's hard to say that.
One brief moment he did at the beginning of Street Fighter V, he played Fang, who was a terrible character. He got top 3 at final round. Granted, it was the first tournament, but he was also using a bad character. If he was using a fine character.
No, I mean, for sure, dude.
Yeah.
I think it's likely that he would do really well, but he just hasn't actually done it. So I feel like that's the only thing that's being left off of his resume. He doesn't need to do it. You know, he plays games he enjoys, and he doesn't enjoy some games, so that's cool. I think he did get 7th, by the way.
Oh, was it 7th? Okay, okay. Yeah. But again, I think Tokido's up there. I even think it's also a disservice not to mention guys like Sako and Nuki.
Dude, for sure.
Right?
For sure you got to mention them. I feel like you got to mention Fudo,
Right.
Who won Evo in Street Fighter and was one of the best Virtua Fighter players ever.
He's also the best at that gun strata game.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, we heard about that. Yeah.
Random.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah,
so.
I feel like you got to put somebody like Haitani up there for longevity and strength in a bunch of different games.
Oh, Olaf, I wish wasn't you the one having to say that, but that's just not true.
What?
Nobody enjoys Street Fighter.
Oh, definitely
5.
not true.
Definitely not true. In fact, I was just talking to SD Pinoy, and he's like, man, I don't know why everyone hates this game. He's like, I love this game. I enjoy the game. He's like, I like it more than Street Fighter 4.
Well, I am with him on that.
Yeah. Dude, I wish it wasn't Olaf who said that, dude. Ugh, come on. You know that's not true. You know that's not true, dude.
Yeah, definitely Ricky is in that conversation, for sure.
Oh, yeah. Ricky's in that conversation as well.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, Ricky is somebody who also has a ton of success over many, many years. She got 2nd place at Capcom Cup last year.
Right.
So she over almost 20 years has also been top in Street Fighter and CVS 2 and Marvel 2, and she was a good Tekken player for a while. And yeah,
dude, Vi, how is Vi not even
Vi
in this
for sure in that
conversation?
conversation.
He was a Tekken champion.
Yeah.
He was a
definitely,
Tekken champion. He beat the Korean guy at that time, and the Korean guy got mad. And according to Gerald, came back and then just whooped Alex like crazy in like a 1st to 10 afterwards or something like that. But Vi was also our MvC2 champion for a while until Ricky beat him.
That's
actually.
Right.
But Vi's been like ridiculous at every game. So
for sure, man.
And he's still schooling people right now. Right?
He's very talented.
Yeah, he's very and like when he's playing in Wednesday Night Fights, like if he wasn't running events and he was dedicating himself to playing, he would actually be beating a lot of those guys more consistently.
Totally agree.
But like a lot of those guys in SoCal are like Snake Eyes. All those guys are good because of Vi, because Vi is teaching him the right things and stuff like that. So Vi, again, a lot of people don't realize that Vi was Justin before Justin. He was the Justin before then. So
for sure.
Yeah.
You got to look at Infiltration.
Yes. Infiltration.
So among like this generation, I saw Alex's tweet. I think of this generation, that Infiltration and Sonic Fox are probably like number 1 and 2. But I don't know, whatever. I think that it's like, sort of like them, Chris G, maybe Goichi, something like that. Yeah. Infiltration dominated so strongly in 2012, and then dominated Cross Tekken as long as that game was out, and then dominated the first half of the first season of SF5, and then came back and took some time off, and then came back and won Evo Japan.
Right.
So, yeah.
He's not back yet, though,
no,
according to Infiltration.
But the fact that he's doing that in the most played games in the world, it lends, I think, big credence to his rating.
Yeah. Cien, obviously, Kazunoko, those are all great players. But, what's interesting is that there's not a lot of these players who have also had success in Tekken.
Well, yeah.
3D crossover. That's why.
That's relatively rare.
That's actually why I have Ryan Hart in there, because he won an Evo.
That's right.
And then he's defeated Daigo in several Street Fighter 4 tournaments.
Sure.
And then Tokido, of course, he's won Soul Calibur tournaments. He's placed high in Tekken tournaments.
Yep.
So yeah, that took for me. It's Tokido or nothing, pretty much.
I think Tokido's number 1.
Yeah.
I'm with you, man.
Yeah, see, I mean, there's just too many people who are saying these things, like arguing about Street Fighter V's popularity. I always said if people are playing Street Fighter V for money, they should have been playing Injustice this entire whole time, because the field is smaller.
Yeah.
And there's obviously a ton of money there. Sonic Fox has made like $300,000 off of that, right? Part of that money could have gone to somebody else. If people were only playing Street Fighter for money, they would also be playing Injustice right now.
Yeah,
like it's a silly argument to say that people are only playing it because they're used to it or for the money. Like this many people would not still be playing it if they didn't enjoy it in some way. And the thing about it is everyone's like, well, all the top players complain about it. Dude, you should have seen all the top players during CVS2 and Third Strike days.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like, people were crying about that game forever.
SF4 as well.
Yeah, I think the only game where top players weren't crying about cheap stuff was Marvel 2, because everyone used the cheap stuff.
Right, yeah. There was at the start of it, but midway through, it was just like whatever.
Right, yeah, exactly.
So anyway, when it comes to greatest of all time, I feel like you have to identify which one you're talking about. You're talking about the players who did the best versus their competition at their time, taking into account the fact that needs to have been a lot of people. It can't be a small scene. I think I was the best Arm Joe player in the world for a while.
For what?
Exactly the point. Nobody knows what Arm Joe is. It's a terrible game, but nobody played it, so who cares?
Okay.
I came up with a ton of tech for that game, but it literally doesn't matter.
Which game is this? There was that
it's the Les Miserables game.
Oh, there was a Les Miserables fighting game?
Yes, there was.
Oh, Jesus. Oh, God.
But the point is that I can't toot my own horn about that, right? Like, who cares if I was the best of 5 people in the world?
Right.
So there has to be some like base amount of players who dominated that scene at that time. Or secondarily, are you talking about who would beat who else in fantasy battle over space and time? Right.
And again, it's the whole thing that sucks about that is that everybody was born in different environments, right? So it's like, even if you, like, let's say the answer to that question would be different if you took someone from the 90s and put them into 2000s. Like, let's say you took player A from the 90s, warped him into the 2000, like into 2010, and played against player B. Or if you took player B from 2010 and warped them back into the 90s to play player A, those two would produce completely different results. You know what I mean? Like, just based off of the technology and how the environment that they were born in and stuff like that.
So I feel like you take somebody who gets out of pools at EVO today, and if you just directly translate them to like 1998, they're like the best player in the country.
Right.
But hard to compare like that.
Right.
Yeah. So I feel like that's like a thing that you have to say when you're having this conversation. Which one are you talking about? And a lot of the conversations that I see people having, they're just talking past each other on this.
Yeah.
They're just, this player was so good at the time, and somebody else is like, well, he would lose to X and Y. That's those are different conversations.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Exactly. So.
But I feel like in either case, well, it's probably Tokido. Definitely in the first one.
The nice thing about Tokido is he's the only one who's done well back then and now.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, obviously other players have done well, but he won EVO 17 years apart. That's crazy.
Yeah.
16 years apart?
I don't mean 16. Doing well. I mean being
They're the
on
best.
top.
Yeah.
On top. Yes.
Definitely agree, man.
Okay. All right. That's a fun topic to talk about. So
it would be cool if Combo Fiend still played seriously. That would be cool.
I mean, there's always rumors of him wanting to come back, right?
Well,
to bring back the Combatorium and stuff like that.
That'd be so cool.
Yeah, that would be sick. Because he should be in the conversation too. I actually am mad at myself that I haven't named him in any of the social media conversations or anything, that I've forgotten about Combo Fiend 2 just because he's disappeared out of our consciousness because he's taken on a different role.
Right.
But honestly, he should be up there too because he was one of the best at MvC2 and Guilty Gear and CVS2 and Third Strike.
I remember him like picking up KOF13 and he won some tournament.
Yeah,
he had no history with KOF. But he was
when
like, this is fun. He won
Exerd came out, he got top 8 at an event with Axel.
Okay.
He's still super good. He's still super good. So.
Well, I hope he does come back. If he tweeted about wanting to come back, that'd be awesome to see it.
Okay.
He does work at Marvel.
Yes, he does.
That's true. Alrighty.
Jump to the other side.
Yeah, I know, right.